And are you wondering? Oh, you know I'm wondering too. And are you dreaming like me? Then it's of you. So move right and move on. That shadow will follow you, babe, and love will help you hang on.
Hang on.
And are you thinking? Oh, you know I'm thinking too. And are you calling out in the middle of the night now, babe? Oh, you know there's someone just like you.
There's someone just like you.
So move right and move wrong. That shadow will follow you, babe, and love will help you hang on.
Hang on.
If you should only prove and only prove that my love is real. Yeah, you know my love is real. My love is real. And then you would realize, oh, you realize, baby, what's the deal? If you should only prove that my love is real. Yeah, you know my love is real. And then you would realize, oh, you know you realize, what's the deal now?
What's the deal now, baby?
So move right.
Move on.
Right.
Move on. Right now. Just move.
Right.
Just move, babe. All you gotta do is move. Yeah. Just move now. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Just move now. Just move now.
Thank you, and welcome everybody.
Hello. Are you hearing? How are you all doing? Good, me too. Just a little bit of musical irrigation for the soul, you know?
Part of the team of love today. We're Dwight Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dwight and Nicole. Hello, everyone. Are y'all awake? How y'all doing? You all right? All right. My name is Amir Ahmed. My English pronouns are he, his, and him, and I serve as Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at University of Vermont. It is my honor to play a small part of how we advance that work here at UVM. I want to thank Dwight and Nicole. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wonderful artistry with us. Please stay till the end to catch a little bit more of their beautiful music. They are a local band that tour throughout the eastern U.S. Since 2017, and they've won numerous awards nationally and locally. So thank you again. Did they do one more? Oh, I think. Okay, so we're gonna do one more song now. I apologize. I missed the cue. So we'll do one more song and then we'll get started. All right, thanks.
All right, we're gonna do one more song. This song is called Wait, and it's actually a song about not waiting and acting in the moment and letting that moment be dictated by our hearts as much as we are dictated by our need to fight for what's right. I wrote this in 2016, and it's still relevant. Maybe one day it'll be less so, we'll see. Heaven above, never behind. Sometimes the easy way is the hardest to find. So follow the goal. Follow the light. The games that we play, put up a good fight. Oh, I said now
Wait.
I'm not done fighting for love. We better put down our gloves and live to see. Live to see another day. Open the door. Take it outside. Carry no burdens, and tell me no lies. 'Cause I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm not alone, no. Sometimes the easy way is the only way home. Oh, I said now wait. won't you hear me? Oh, won't you hear me? Oh, won't you hear me? Hear what I said. Hear me. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. All right.
As we begin this proceeding today, it is important for us to acknowledge that the campus of the University of Vermont sits within a place of gathering and exchange, shaped by water and stewarded by ongoing generations of indigenous people, in particular the Western Abenaki. Acknowledging the relations between water, land, and people is in harmony with the mission of the university. Acknowledging the serious and significant impact of our histories on indigenous peoples and their homelands is a part of the university's ongoing work of teaching, research, and engagement, and an essential reminder of our past and our interconnected futures for the many of us gathered on this land. UVM respects the indigenous knowledge interwoven in this place and commits to uplifting the indigenous peoples and cultures present on this land and within our community. And as we begin our reflection and honoring of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., I want to share a few of my thoughts in this incredibly important and poignant time in our history, both for the university as well as in Vermont and in our society. It is important for us to share that the University of Vermont is currently embarking on the development of a 5-year diversity, equity, inclusion strategic planning process. And the division that I lead, the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, is honored to work with the entire senior leadership and the University Diversity Council to work in collaboration and in partnership in the development of that 5-year plan. This will be the first ever data-driven DEI strategic plan at the university. And this is the ways in which we seek to walk the walk at University of Vermont going forward. And in doing so, we are aligning with UVM's common ground values. And if you learn and understand what those values are, respect, integrity, innovation, openness, justice, responsibility. There is no public figure who has embodied those values greater than Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And so this day is, honoring and this reflection is particularly poignant for our university as we look to those beacons like Dr. King to live into our values. And as we engage in our DEI strategic planning process, we continue to think about the action that is required, right? It is not enough for us to just talk. Recently, Reverend Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., has spoken on the ongoing effort to cheapen her father's legacy and make it comfortable and convenient and easy to stay in a space of platitudes. We seek to go beyond that here at University of Vermont. Dr. Bernice King, Reverend Dr. Bernice King, bemoaned institutional and individual racism, economic and healthcare disparities and inequities, police violence, and militarized international order in her comments, and said that She's increasingly exhausted, exasperated, and frankly disappointed that there has been so little progress. We are not simply trying to advance Dr. King's legacy in this moment. We are seeking to protect from regression. That is the moment that we are in the United States. And so the answer is committed action. And that's what we seek to do here at University of Vermont going forward. And so it is my honor to introduce to you a tremendous leader in helping us advance that. And I feel thankful to work with our provost, Patty Prelock, who is provost and senior vice president of the University of Vermont. Formerly, she was the dean of University of Vermont's College of Nursing and Health Science for 10 years, and is professor of communication sciences and disorders, and a professor of pediatrics in the Larner College of Medicine here at the university. Provost Prelock.
Thank you so much, Amir, and good afternoon and welcome everyone to the 2023 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King celebration and keynote lecture, which we are going to hear certainly soon, and she's going to have some amazing words for us. And again, Nicole and Dwight were amazing as well. Gave a really wonderful spirit, so thank you for that. Gave me goosebumps. It's really an honor to be here with Dr. Carolyn Finney and all of you who are in the chapel with us in person or online, so thank you for joining us. I also want to thank Amir Ahmed, who has been a wonderful partner as my Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and his team have really brought us together for the signature event, and I appreciate it. And to know that we have local extraordinary talent and expertise, and I'm so glad we capitalized on bringing Carolyn here. Yeah. You know, events like this play, as Amir said, a critical role at the university and in the broader community, and as Amir said, we really are trying to move towards action. They really, truly do reflect our common ground values, values I believe that Dr. King would approve of. You know, it's been 55 years since Dr. King's assassination, and like all of you, I've been reflecting a lot on how much has changed and how much hasn't changed, and the work that lies ahead. Dr. King taught us that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. This is work that all of us must engage in, and Dwight Nicole, your message and your music really rang to those words. I think Dr. King would be very proud. I think we have a lot to engage in, and work that I know our students can lead and bring light to what is possible and love to what is felt. Dr. King's legacy is profound in so many ways. He dedicated his life to the civil rights movement. He was one of the best orators in modern history. He received the Nobel Peace Prize, and he led a social revolution that really was intended to better the lives of millions. Yet he was just one person with a passionate determination to change the world. He wasn't rich or famous when his journey began, and many sources describe his early academic performance at Morehouse College as just average, yet he enrolled in college when he was 15, which isn't actually average. But as we honor Dr. King's truly awesome, almost superhuman legacy, rather than letting it set us apart from you, let it pull him closer to you. Embrace his legacy, and to our students, use it to find your calling. Commit yourself to creating a better, more just world, as Vice Provost Amir Ahmed had said. Understand that social justice intersects with every aspect of our lives, and know that you can change the world in an infinite number of ways. 6 months before he was killed, Dr. King shared the following with junior high school students in Philadelphia, which has relevance to all of our students today. He said, "Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be a sun, be a star. For it isn't by the size that you win or fall, be the best whatever you are." So let the values of Dr. King and those that he lived, respect, justice, responsibility, excellence, and service, and hope always guide you in the trail you take and the star you become. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Provost Prelock. As you see, we have a tremendous leader in our provost, and I do want to acknowledge that our president, Suresh Garimella, really wanted to be here. Is not in the country at the moment, but sent his best wishes for today. As Provost Prelock said, we have a lot of work to do to continue to advance the legacy of Dr. King, and today's program, including having Dr. Carolyn Finney here to speak to the important work that she has advanced, including with regards to environmental justice, is critical to the work of University of Vermont. So we are really thankful to have a speaker here that really embodies how we live into these values here at University of Vermont. We have a student who will be introducing Dr. Finney. His name is Aiden Carpenter. Aiden, yes. Aiden has a lot of fans, and he is very popular on our campus. We are all fans. Aiden is a sophomore and president of the Black Student Union. He's an avid biker, hiker, and lover of the outdoors. He's been active in creating spaces for conversations about sustainability and diversity in Vermont, as well as coordinating multi-day bike races in the greater Burlington area. So he embodies those exact values that we were just talking about. Aiden Carpenter.
Hi. I don't know. They say all these fun things about me. I am. So, every morning when I wake up, kind of get up and I'm like, one of the first things I think about, when am I going to ride my bike today? And I'm going to take a note. Today that also applied. I got out, went on my bike. Snow is a bad idea. But I love being on my bikes. I love them. There's a big part of me. They make me who I am. And honestly, when I sit and think, why am I here at UVM, it's because we have a really good bike team. I sat and I was like, the biking in Vermont's kind of nice. But I'd be lying if I said cycling was the most inviting sport in the world. It's very expensive, very elitist, and very white. So, you might ask, if it's so expensive, elitist, and white, why do I love it so much? For me, it's about being outside in nature, having fun and exploring, all that cute stuff. I grew up in a big city, the only nature kind of near me were those little plots of grass. You might get a little tree in the middle if you're lucky. But if I got on my bike and I pedaled hard enough and I went far enough, you'd go get a forest. You'd get a ton of trees, some birds, a stream, all that good stuff. The great outdoors, it's fun. I love it. Nature's amazing. But in the back of my head, whenever I'm out there surrounded by nature, I always think, why am I miles from home just for some trees? Why haven't I seen a person that looks like me in literal hours? And there's a ton of really funny little one-liner quips you can answer that with, but it's a complicated question with a very, very complicated answer. And I'm really happy to have taken the chance to have read some of Dr. Finney's work, because to put it simply, being Black and being outdoors is really hard. And it's a variety of reasons. You got the public policy, you got weird cultural opinions, you got media representation. It's a lot. But to put it frankly, the United States is almost 250 years old, and we still haven't figured out equality. Martin Luther King Jr.'s last speech ended with him speaking about the journey to the promised land and how he knew we would get there, but snuck in there, as you guys might remember, was, "I may not get there with you," and sadly, he was correct. That was his last speech. But even sadder is to really sit and think we ourselves have not made it to the promised land. I think we're quite far from it. But we still have to go. The journey to MLK's promised land is still well underway, and we will get there. Not just for him, not just for us, but for the people that come after us, the little kiddies, my little sisters. I want them to have something nice. And that's why I think it's beautiful we're celebrating MLK's legacy, life and legacy, by inviting someone that's continuing his work today. Dr. Carolyn Finney is a storyteller, author, and cultural geographer who is grounded in both artistic and intellectual ways of knowing. She pursued an acting career for 11 years, but 5 years of backpacking trips through Africa and Asia and living in Nepal changed the course of her life. Motivated by these experiences, Carolyn returned to school after a 15-year absence, to get this, to complete a BA, MA, and a PhD in geography. All of these were at her alma mater, Clark University. Along with national and international public speaking, writing, media engagements, consulting, and teaching, Dr. Finney served on the U.S. National Parks Advisory Board for 8 years. Her first book, Black Faces, White Spaces, Reimagining the Relationship of African Americans to the Great Outdoors, was released in 2014, and we will have available during her book signing after the event over there. Yeah. Do talk. She's fun to talk to. Some of her recent publications include, in 2022, Joy's Revelation in Nature Swagger, Stories and Visions of Black Joy in the Outdoors, The Perils of Being Black in Public, We Are All Christian Cooper and George Floyd, in the Garden in June of 2020, among numerous others. Upcoming essays in 2023 include Memory Divine in the anthology A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars. Currently, she is working on her new book that takes a more personal journey into the very complicated relationship between race, land, and belonging in the United States. Dr. Finney workshopped a performance piece as part of a Mellon residency at the New York Botanical Gardens, and currently is an artist scholar in residence at Middlebury College. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Carolyn Finney.
Is my mic on? That's what I'm talking about. Oh, look, there's my, okay. All right. I have to pretend that. I was telling a few people today, I said, I live by myself here in Burlington, and usually I'm talking to people every week, but always around the holidays, and then usually for the first few weeks in January, I'm just by myself in my apartment, and this is the first talk publicly. I'm just like, people, okay, so if I twitch, I'm so happy to be here because I'm a people person, but it's taken me a minute. So first of all, I want to thank Aiden, and I know that it's hard because I can't help but talk back, but how much I appreciate you, not just what you said about me, but what you said about you and how important it is for us to hear that and see you fully here. I wanted to thank Provost Patty Praylock. I want to thank Vice Provost Amir Ahmed. I want to thank Beverly Belisle, who is my friend and my sister. I want to thank Sandy Bermonson, I hope I said that right, who has kept me in line this entire time. Justin Sell, all the other tech folks who are making this happen, and everyone here, and your music. It's the first time I heard you two today. What? Can you come with me every time I speak? Because yeah, that was fabulous. Okay, I said my thank yous. I have more to say, but, uh-oh, did I do something wrong? Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, that's kind of fancy and all. So, what kind of human being are you choosing to be? So I put this up here because I guess it's been about 2 months ago, brother Cornel West, y'all know Cornel, man. So he came to speak at the Flynn Theater downtown, and I went with my friend Jenny McGinn. And first of all, I want to say, I just mean this in the nicest way, the room was packed. But that is the most local black people I have ever seen in Vermont in my 3.5 years here. I looked around and I was like, who are all these people? Where do they live? And Cornell was amazing. I think there was some student representation from UVM. There was also some other local African Americans that were there. And he got up there and he talked about everything. He did everything with no notes, right? Because that's Cornell. So he talked about justice and climate change and racism. I mean, he covered all the things. But this is the very first question he asked. What kind of human being are you choosing to be? And I was feeling all good about myself because we were talking about empathy and being compassionate and understanding and opening. I was like, yeah, I got it. And all of us came out afterwards. Sandy, you were there, right? We were just feeling ourselves like, yeah, we're all those things. We're all so wonderful. This is so great. And then the universe decided to test me, as the universe likes to do. So about 3 days later, I got an email. And I have to read the email. It's very short, but it's important that I get it right. So I spend a lot of my time, most of the time I'm on a plane and I go around and I have the privilege of having these kinds of conversations with people around the country. And I often get emails from people I don't know. Most of the time they're really nice. But this is the one I got this particular day. Hi, I saw your racist book at the National Park Service Center today, and I made sure to put a normal, non-racist book in front of your stack so that no one else would see your racist book. Please stop being racist. Our world depends on harmony, not disharmony, and racists like you, stop being racist. White people are great. And she signed it, Sarah the Great. Now, it's easy to laugh at it, and I've got to tell you that it's not the first time I've heard something like that, but it hurts every time I hear it, because I'm actually pretty thin-skinned around, what it means. And after I read that, I don't know who I called. I called a friend, and they were just trying to laugh. You have to just let it roll off your skin. But I got to tell you, I did not feel compassionate. I did not feel empathetic. And what I wanted to do was punch back. And it's really important that the first response I had was anger. And I was like, damn, Cornell wouldn't be feeling good about me right now, right? I'm not living up to that. And so I want to put that in the room because I think a lot of us hold that tension in a very particular way. And I'll come back to that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, Martin Luther King, Dr. King. When George Floyd was murdered, so I moved here in 2019, about 6 months before COVID hit. And because I largely make my living from doing this, when it came around, when March 2020 happened and suddenly I wasn't flying everywhere like everybody else, I was at home wondering, can I pay my rent? But we shifted to virtual. But more importantly, on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered. And most of us, if not all of us, have seen that. In the same 24-hour period, Christian Cooper walked into Central Park and had his skin weaponized against him by a white woman named Amy Cooper. So it happened within a 24-hour period. The Guardian reached out to me and said, would you write us a piece about George Floyd? And I said, yeah, of course I will, but I can't write a piece about George Floyd without also talking about Christian Cooper, because most of us live on a continuum. And to understand at one end of that continuum, you can be dismissed, diminished, derailed, and another you can be dead. And that's sort of a daily experience for so many of us. And they understood that, and so I wrote that piece about them. And I'm telling you that because I cannot talk about Dr. Martin Luther King without also talking about Malcolm X. Oh yeah, she said that. I had to be honest with you. Like I said, when I come to a place today and tell some of the stories I tell and what's the theme, what do I think about Dr. King when I come in the table? I wrote here when I come into a room like this and want to have a conversation with all of you. I wrote here because I grew up in a house where both of these men, Their actions, their ideas, their presence was present, right? I want to talk about my father a little bit because he said he was more Malcolm X than Dr. King, and he said it all the time. He was an angry black man, my father, who lived through segregation. He was an angry black man who fought for his country only to be denied benefits and opportunities when he returned home. He was an angry black man who wanted to provide for his family by any means necessary. He didn't disparage Dr. King. He just felt that the anger of Malcolm X was familiar, and fighting, as Malcolm X described it, was something he knew how to do. So I grew up with both of them in my house. And I have to always say that because my father and I really didn't get along. He was always trying to get me to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and of course I didn't do it just because he asked me to do it. And I didn't read it till I was about 33 years old, and it actually opened up my mind quite a bit when I did so. When I think about Malcolm X and I think about Dr. King, I think about how both men began life as black men in America, but in radically different circumstances. They disagreed on how best to improve the lives of black people, but agreed that their work was about, quote, equal rights and justice for black people in America. Both evolved. King became more radical and Malcolm became more inclusive. We can have a conversation about that. And they were both assassinated at 39 years old. So again, I want to say to you that I was influenced by both of them. Their commitment, their intention, their ability to change, and their love for who we might become. Every time I hear Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech or I read it, I burst into tears. There's something about the idea of a dream for me that's visceral. For me, that's the common ground, is the dream. I wrote here, that dream is wide and vast and dense and often without signposts, but it is there nevertheless. So I want to talk about that new statue in Boston called The Embrace. And if you haven't been paying attention to the news and social media, which is okay, I understand if you haven't been, there's really disagreement about what the sculpture, there's this new sculpture that's supposed to reflect the love between Coretta Scott King and Dr. King. And actually what you see are sort of disembodied arms, hugging each other. And this is the picture that the artist, Hank Willis Thomas, actually used as a reference. I haven't been there yet. I've seen a lot of the pictures, and yes, a lot of people in social media are making some derogatory statements about it, but that's not actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about an article by Karen Ataya at the Washington Post. She's a black writer there, and she wrote an article that was entitled, "Boston's Embrace Holds Fast to the Whitewash View of Martin Luther King." She talks about how the work, in her mind, de-radicalizes and de-racializes Dr. King's work. And it got me thinking about the way that I have conversations with audiences. Am I being too soft? Here's a quote something that she wrote. "The statue reinforces how white America loves to see King not as the radical who was murdered for fiercely challenging capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy, but as a man who used feel-good interpersonal love to overcome the racist violence of America's institutions. That reduces racism to an issue of people not being nice to one another, not one of systems and institutions that perpetuate anti-black violence and inequality," end quote. I have the great privilege of being able to process these ideas for myself and the work that I do on a daily basis. And since 2020, I tell people in various capacities, I've probably engaged with people over 200 times to have these kind of conversations, and I feel a way about that. But I'm still asking myself, am I being too soft in the work that I do? If I talk about healing, redemption, relationship, and love, are we being too soft? I wrote because I'm angry too. Right, so here's a few things that I'm angry about. I just need to put it on the table because we've got to ride with me and we're going to get to the good stuff, but we got to say the real stuff. I write here, you can't get to Kumbaya without doing the work, right? And I can't get there without actually saying what's true for me at the moment. I'm angry about the silencing of certain histories in academic institutions in Florida. I'm angry about politics and politicians that spend their time saying who said what when instead of actually doing the work that Dr. King said was needed, not just for black people, but for all people. I'm angry about that brouhaha over one of my childhood favorites, M&Ms, and their spokes candies. Like, what is that? And that some people find that threatening, that they take the sweetness in our lives and it can be turned into something bitter. And I'm angry that an unhoused woman can get hosed down by another human being in arguably the most progressive city in the country, and that we direct most of our vitriol to the man in question, not the housing problem itself. I'm angry about climate change, the loss of trees, land, water, wildlife, breathable air that affects some more than others, but in the end will affect us all. And I'm angry about Sarah the Great. Her ability to name, frame me, and blame me from a place of anonymity without ever knowing me. To paraphrase a line from Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, and I want to say it right, we cannot be satisfied. We cannot be satisfied. I am not satisfied. How do I evolve my thinking and in doing so do unto others as I would do for myself? How do I stand with others so that we can do the work of dismantling structural and systemic racism for the benefit of all people? How do I come correct when I feel all these things? And the last month has been rough. I'm feeling it every day, all the time. It's hard to turn on the news and not feel those things for myself. It doesn't make me special. I think it just makes me human. So I always talk about the question about where we stand. And this is probably 7 or 8 years ago now. I was in an airport at SFO and waiting to get on a plane, like we often do, and there was a woman of South Asian descent standing in front of me. There was 2 women of European descent standing behind me. We're getting ready to board. A flight attendant comes off and says, we have to wait. The plane's a little delayed. So we did the thing you often do, right? We all started talking to each other. And it was great. We were all really friendly. But the South Asian woman's looking kind of serious. She isn't even cracking a smile, right? But everybody started saying, so what do you do? And I said, I go around, I give these talks about, I don't know what I said, environment, diversity, race, or whatever I said. And one of the white women said, well, you must be really empathetic. You have to be empathetic to do that work. And I nodded in agreement. I said, absolutely. Suddenly, the South Asian woman speaks up. And she says, I've been to 75 countries. I go around to businesses and talk about the question of diversity and inclusion. Sympathy and empathy are nice. But who do you stand with? And she never cracked. I was scared. She was small, but I was scared. She never cracked a smile. And when I got on the plane, I wrote it down, and I thought about that. Because she wasn't saying that empathy and sympathy aren't important, but how are you able to stand with someone? So I'm going to tell you a little bit, and many of you that have heard me speak before will hear my story a little bit because it's really important for me to talk about where it is that I stand. But first I want to talk about Bryan Stevenson because I'm in love with some Bryan Stevenson. If you don't know who Bryan Stevenson is, he's an African-American civil rights lawyer who's been to the Supreme Court at least 5 times. He works to get black men and black teenagers off death row. He helped to create that memorial site in Alabama, which is an opportunity for places that have had lynchings happen on their soil to come and make peace with that, or at least be accountable for that. So about 2 years ago, I saw him in a documentary on HBO. And, oh my gosh, I was scribbling so many notes. And he talked about, he's 62, and I was like, we're the same age, we're born a day apart. I'm like, oh yeah, he said he's single at the time he was. I was like, oh yeah, me too. And he said that he works all the time. Sorry, I'm just looking for my tissue. He said that he works all the time. That's just all he does. He doesn't have children, he doesn't have a partner, he works all the time, and I'm checking down the list going, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too. And the interviewer asked him, why do you do what you do? And the first thing he said was, well, I do what I do because the system is broken. And I'm nodding like, yeah, me too. And he paused for a minute and he said, well, I do what I do because people are broken. And I was like, oh yeah, me too, writing it down. And then his voice got kind of soft and he said, I do what I do because I'm broken too. And that laid me out because I knew that that was also true as well. So I will tell the story. I like this quote. And this is who it is by, but we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. Because I always say that all knowledge is subjective, that we bring all of who we are to bear upon anything it is that we're trying to understand. We're all biased. I'm biased, you're biased, which isn't the same as being racist. But for me, this is how I understood I need to know where it is that I stand in order to come correct to any relationship that I want to enter in, one of support or otherwise. So I always talk about my parents, Rose and Henry. This picture's taken back in the 50s. Rose and Henry grew up in Floyd, Virginia, by the Blue Ridge Mountains. They grew up very poor, and they grew up black. They're still black, not so poor. Huge families at the time. They got married really young. My father went off to fight in the Korean War. And when my father came back for the Korean War, he needed a job, right? So this is the 50s. And he talked about seeing a park ranger in a park ranger uniform in the state of Virginia, and he thought that looked like a great government job. So he went to apply, but as a veteran in particular. But they told him, I'm sorry, but we don't hire Negroes. And so my parents, like a lot of black people in the South at that time, decided to come north, and they came north to New York because my father had a sister who was a nurse, had moved to New York, got married, seemed to be doing really well. My father had 2 job offers. The first was that he could be a janitor in Syracuse, New York. Syracuse is about 5 hours north of New York City. He didn't take that job. The job he ended up taking was 30 minutes outside of New York City in Westchester County. You had a very wealthy Jewish family who owned a lot of land that had a 12-acre estate, and they needed full-time caretakers for that estate. They needed a chauffeur, a gardener, or sometimes housekeeper, because there's 2 houses on the estate. This is the gardener's cottage that we lived in, and there's a bigger house where the owners would come to on weekends and holidays. So my parents took this job. It's a stunning 12 acres. The next few pictures are just going to be pictures of that estate because you need to understand how beautiful this land was. There was a small pond, there's a swimming pool, there's peach, plum, apple trees, pear trees, vegetable gardens, flower gardens, simply stunning. This was also in an all-white, very wealthy neighborhood. It's not bad because it's all white, but I have to emphasize it because of what we're talking about here. When I say wealthy, Harry Winston had property down the street. Schaefer of Schaefer Beer lived next door. Wingfield Golf Club was around the corner. In 1990, a Japanese-American woman moved in and was there for a few years and moved out. So you get a sense. My parents wanted to have kids, and they thought they couldn't have kids. And with the help of the owners, I'm here today because they decided to adopt me. I was born in New York City at Spence Chapin. And then what I always say to any audience is that they relaxed, and they had my first brother. And then they did some more relaxing, and they had my second brother. So me and my brothers had run this estate during the week when the owners weren't there. This is where we all learned how to swim by the time we were 7. We rode our bikes. There was a long driveway that we could ride our bikes on. We played out in the woods. I used to call the driveway a piranha river. I mean, we had all kinds of stories. Being outside was natural for us to do on that estate. The other story that I tell people is when I was 9 years old. So me and my brothers went to a public school, a Merrimack Avenue public school, largely Italian-American working class, some African-American working class. These were the days when you could walk home, and your parents didn't have to think about it too much. And there was always policemen patrolling the neighborhood that I lived in. It was a 2-lane road when it's up on the hill. And I was right around the corner, so 9 years old, 4th grade, little afro, reading glasses, not impressive. The cop stopped me, a white policeman in his car. He asked me where I was going. I gave him the address, 1000 Old White Plains Road, because it's a mouthful. And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, do you work there?" And I'm thinking, dude, I'm 9. I don't say that, of course, but I said, no, but I was confused. I said, no, I lived there. I went home. I told my parents. My father got angry. He calls the police station. He gives them hell, and they never bother me and my brothers again. But what I also tell audiences is that I'm an adult now, and I have to think about the logics of that. Because we know we've all seen many, many, many stories of non-white people, black people in particular, walking of all ages in all kinds of neighborhoods all the time, even rich ones, poor ones, and everything in between, and getting stopped and asked, why are you here? Right? What are the logics that are at play at that time? I want to jump ahead now into the 1990s. So the patriarch of the family that owned the land had died many years earlier, but the matriarch is now very sick. My parents have been caring for this land for nearly 40 years. And she knew that she was going to pass away soon, and so she's thinking about what happens to my parents when they pass away. To her credit, she thought about trying to keep them on this land. This land was worth over $3 million at the time. Property taxes were over $125,000 a year. My dad had been making something like $25,000 a year. It wasn't going to happen. So she had a house built for them in Leesburg, Virginia. And they picked Leesburg, Virginia, because my youngest brother at this point was married, settled, had kids there. I'll never be settled, and neither will my other brother. My father likes to call it Sleesburg, but that's another conversation. she passed away, and she passed away by her request with my father at her bedside. And it's really important I say that because power is complicated, but so is love, right? And my father loved her as well. The new owner moves in. My parents stay on for another bunch of years, up until 2003. The new owner tried to get my parents to stay on, but they're in their 70s at this point. Now they've been caring for that land for nearly 50 years. When they finally left in 2003, I'm going to get up to the last picture here, they moved to Leesburg. They've been there for a few years in Leesburg, a lovely house on about a half an acre of land. And I always tell audiences, I watched my father in particular get really depressed because he talked about missing the land. And also that they have nothing to leave us. There's no money, there's no land. More importantly, there's no land to leave. And it doesn't matter how many times I tell them that you don't need to leave us anything, you've given us everything. But his depression, and now he's got dementia, so it's really fed into it in a very particular way. They received a copy of a letter from one of their neighbors, and the letter was from the Westchester Land Trust. And the land trust was letting people know that a conservation easement had now been placed on this land. And what that means, or what I thought it meant, was that in perpetuity, everything would be protected. I got a hold of that letter, beautiful pictures of the estate. It talked about the wildlife on the estate, where it sits in the watershed, the importance of protecting this land. And I agreed with everything. And then at the end of the letter, they thanked the new owner for his conservation mindedness. He'd been on the land for maybe 5 years. That didn't bother me so much either. But there was nothing in the letter thanking the people who cared for that land for nearly 50 years. And just like that, they were gone from the environmental history. And for me, that was sort of the personal motivation. My bias is really clear, not just for my parents, but all the people in this country who we don't talk about, think about, and imagine love the land and are on it and care for it and belong to it in a very particular way, and how that actually plays out in the way we make our laws and regulate our movements, I want to say, as it relates to that. That. So I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about why we're black faces, white spaces. So, and you're like, what's that got to do with Denali Camp in Alaska? It's got a lot to do. So I had the privilege of going here this summer. And Denali Camp is a high-end, low-impact camp in the middle of Denali National Park. It's really stunning. And I only got to go because they have an author come in and you get to spend a week there and you get fed these beautiful 3 meals a day and you get your own cabin and there's a greenhouse and everything's sustainable. This picture is taken from my own outhouse. That's where the outline is a heart. That's the view from my outhouse. I've never loved an outhouse so much, right? Beautiful place, but long flight from here. I changed planes in Newark on my way to Anchorage and had a few hours to kill, and I'm walking around the airport, and I stopped at one of those electronics stores, and there was a young black man working in the store. There was nobody else. He was really cute with those little dreadlocks, and he was so happy to see a customer. So, I came in, he was like, and we both had that energy, so we were like, And he said, so where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Alaska. And he did a kind of exaggerated, he went, why are you going there? And so I didn't exaggerate it. I'm going to tell them about black people. And he went, oh, that's a great idea. Good luck, And I laugh every time I tell people that story, and it was just a funny moment, but I understood. I understood everything that wasn't being said underneath that. He was surprised I was going. And I think he worried for me a little bit because I was going. There was an article in 2021 written by a black writer named Maura Cheeks in the Paris Review, and the title of the article is, Isn't Black Representation What We Wanted? And in there she talks about the writer Fran Lebowitz, the thinker, the Jewish writer, thinker, and speaker, Fran Lebowitz. And Fran Lebowitz has a couple of conversations. I'm looking at my notes because I want to get her quoted. I want to quote her correctly. She says in a conversation, she says, quote, why does everyone want to see themselves in books? A book is not supposed to be a mirror, she says, it's supposed to be a door. The writer of the article writes, quote, I understand the sentiment, but I disagree with the argument. It's the type of sentiment that can only be felt by someone who was unknowingly represented almost everywhere she turned. She didn't know what she had. Later on, Fran Lebowitz is in conversation with the great Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison says, quote, I am the reader of the books I write. And Fran Lebowitz says, your other readers aren't you. And Morrison laughs and said, yes, they are, right? So I've been thinking about representation in terms of whose stories are centered, who is centered, how we frame all of our understanding, where our bias comes into play. You know, I'm often thinking about this because if I'm talking about an environmental context, there are certain people who pop up in my head, like Henry David Thoreau and John Muir, whose voices and experiences have defined a set of practices and memories of who we are as human beings and as Americans in relationship to non-human nature, and how we grow that relationship and what that relationship is supposed to look like. I am that young man in Newark, who was challenged to imagine himself in Alaska, accepted, seen, and welcomed. I talk a lot about, how I feel we've been bamboozled. We've been bamboozled, I think, in a lot of ways, but when I think about what I call the dominant environmental narrative, we're telling one story, we have one story. It's not that the story is wrong, but it's supposed to fit everybody at the same time in the same way, and it absolutely does not when I think about a lot of our history. When I think about the Homestead Act in 1862, I know you don't randomly think about the Homestead Act, but when I was doing this work, I looked at the Homestead Act. And I think about, that gun going off at midnight, and people mostly of European descent, when that gun went off, they could run out on the land. They could put a stake down on 160 acres, and if they stayed on it for 5 years, if they gardened, if they built a home, and they survived it, that land was theirs free and clear. That's a beautiful thing. Land is never just about land. It's about economic and political power. It is about legacy. It is about the right to say one belongs. And something like 60% of them did not survive. I'm not interested in diminishing the experience of European immigrants. I can't imagine the loss and the courage it took to leave their homes to come here. But I also have to ask the question, what about the people who lived on the land before? What happened to them? Right? How do we hold both those things? I think about just a couple of years later, Emancipation Proclamations, enslaved Africans are free. They're originally given 400,000 of acres to share among themselves, I guess, and have mules and have their 40 acres so they can do quite the same thing until white plantation owners said, we just gave people who were our property land, and land is never just about land. It's about economic and political power. It is about legacy. It is about belonging. I don't think so, and they took all that land back. I think about, I don't randomly think about these things, but when I'm working on this, I think about the Civil Rights Act and the Wilderness Act, two other important pieces of legislation, particularly during the time of Dr. Martin Luther King. I didn't realize they were in the same year, 1964, two really important pieces of legislation, two really important, thoughtful, and intentional groups of people having these conversations separately. The Civil Rights Act barely, if at all, mentions anything to do directly with the environment. The Wilderness Act barely, if at all, mentions anything about segregation and equity, right? I'm just saying to you what I read. So let's go back a couple of years earlier, 1960. There was a white professor at Boston College named Dr. DeWolf, and he was friends with this African-American couple. He wanted to take them to a national park, but it's 1960, they're black, segregation. He said, we better not go anywhere here in the United States. So let's go to Fundy Bay National Park in Canada. And they all agreed. And Dr. DeWolf wrote a superintendent in Fundy Bay because he wanted to let them know, I'm bringing this African-American couple. They're cultured, they're educated, and yes, I know the fact that he had to explain this is already problematic. And he waited for a return response, because what he said is, I want them to be treated with respect when I bring them. The letter he got back from the superintendent was, I'm sorry, but I can't make that promise because we get so many American visitors here. The couple was Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, who wanted to take a break from their civil rights work to find that, peace in the wilderness that Howard Zahniser and his people who were writing the Wilderness Act were talking about that everybody should have access to and to attain. Even the kings couldn't do it freely and openly. Okay, I'm revving up now. I think a lot about how a lot of this plays in our memories, how we hold this. I actually believe that our collective history is in all of our cells. It's in our body. It's in our bones, right? We hold it in different ways. Some of us can push it away, That's the thing about privilege, and we all got privilege, but some of us can push it away. It doesn't show up every day. Others of us, we wear it like a shirt every single day, and we are never able to forget that we do that. So in 2005, I was living in Atlanta for a year, supposedly writing my dissertation. And my parents came to visit me. And my father, we never went to a national park as a kid. I think it took a while for my father to tell me that because of that incident he had with not getting hired there, that was why. Now he had his daughter on the National Parks Advisory Board, so I was always pushing around that. So when they came to Atlanta, I was like, we are having a Black experience in a national park, a National Historic Site. So we went to the Dr. Martin Luther King National Historic Site. I don't know how many of you have ever been there. A few people? Anybody? A few people, right? So it's on a street in Atlanta where people actually live. You have Ebenezer Baptist Church, you have the house Dr. King grew up in, and you have the visitor center. And myself, my mother, and he, we walked into the visitor center. Now, my father's full name is Henry Lee Finney, and I have to always say this. I was scared to death of my father for many years and angry at him for many years. We didn't get along. He's a old school, conservative, angry Black man who works really hard. We didn't agree on anything. And even though at 2005 I was grown, I still had a set. We're not a touchy-feely family. We don't talk about all emotions. All that stuff isn't there, right in the room. So we walk in, and my mother wanders off, and the whole visitor center was set up like dioramas in the 50s and 60s. So what you got was all these images from the 50s and 60s, and sounds coming over the speaker of Dr. King's voice, and police, and rioting, and dogs, and a replica of the jail cell Dr. King spent time in, and life-size statues of people marching. You had it all happening. So your senses are just being hit. You're being hit over the head, right? I'm standing with my dad, and I'm standing with him in front of a series of pictures. Now, remember, we ain't a touchy-feely family. We don't, if you're having a private moment, you're having your private moment privately. My father suddenly grabs my arm. Now, we're not physical like that either, and I was suddenly 9 years old again, but he grabbed my arm, and I looked over at him, and he had blanched. And I thought what had happened was he was having a heart attack, because it's the only thing logical to me. And then right after that, he giggled. And what I always said, that was even weirder than the blanching. And he pointed, and what he pointed to was a sign. The sign said, "For whites only." It was part of the exhibit. He pointed to the sign. He said, "I saw that sign, and for a minute, I thought we weren't supposed to be here." He was grabbing my arm to get me out. And even though I've told this story over 100 times, it was the very first time I saw his vulnerability. It was the very first time I understood what he carried around inside of him. And it surprised him. Now, it's important for me to say that at the end of the day, he said he had this great experience. That was what was so interesting. Not this terrible, it was great for him. He felt really involved, and I think he was emotionally touched in a very particular way. But it makes me think about all of us that carry it around all the time, right? And it's not always pretty, and it's not always sweet, and it's not always soft. Yeah, that's how I'm feeling these days. Stories of now. So I wrote here, like in 1963, when Dr. King wrote his I Have a Dream speech, I said, "We are in a moment of reckoning, and how will we remember this time?" So Derek Chauvin was convicted of killing George Floyd. I think that was 2021. And I was watching CNN, right, that day to see, what was going to happen here. And the white newscaster, Jake Tapper, was having a conversation with the black newscaster, Don Lemon. And I like a lot of people, like CNN was they were my family during COVID. I was watching those guys every day. And Jake Tapper said, this is so amazing. He said, in 2016, you couldn't see any white politician or somebody really famous. None of them would say out loud, Black Lives Matter. None of them would say out loud white supremacy. He says, but now, Hillary Clinton had just written a piece at the Washington Post where she must have said white supremacy 3 times out loud. He says, wow, so isn't there, haven't we, don't you think there's been a sea change in terms of awareness? And Don Lemon, because Don Lemon gave him a look like, well, there's been a sea change in terms of awareness, but there hasn't been a sea change in terms of practice. And for me, and it was something one of you said earlier, like when you were up here, is talking about the difference between being aware, and I try not to use the word awake because I think we've bleached all the meaning out of that. But it's important to become aware, but what does it mean to turn something into practice? Because that actually costs something. And how do we get there? I wrote here, but I believe for any practice to work well, for you to meet a person or a community where they are, you've got to be willing to embrace who we've been and challenge the ways and means, the rules and regulations we have institutionalized for doing the work that we do, that at best does not recognize different people, ideas, or experiences, and at worst extracts, transacts, diminishes, and erases ideas, experiences, and ultimately people. So are we really ready? You know, everything, I'm so excited that the university and like a lot of places like this are really actively trying to think about, you know, how do we do this kind of work? And if we're not ready, how do we get ready to do this? I was thinking about an article written by an Ojibwe writer named David Truer. He wrote it for The Atlantic. I think it was also 2021. And he does all this research talking about land and stewardship and the history of his people, and he very calmly, it's a very long article, and he lays it all out. He's just bringing you with him. He's bringing you with him, and right at the end he said, yes, all of the national parks should be given back to Native people to steward, period. You know, and for me, we can have a conversation about whether that should happen or not, but that's not actually the point I want to make. Are we even ready to have the conversation? What does it mean for us to sit down to talk about reparations, for example, and or giving all the land back to people who are indigenous? Even that. What does it mean for us to have that conversation? What do we need to do in order to get there? You're like, does she have any answers? I might, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I write here, how do we deal with resistance, loss of power, the decentering of a white experience and ownership over land and narrative and a way of life? How do we deal with a kind of debunking and rebirthing of the American story? Are we really ready? And what does that look like? Because we are seeing the resistance. We are seeing the resistance every day, all the time. But oh yeah, that resistance has been here for the last, what would you say, 250 years? It's been here a really long time. For me, it's nothing new. Right? And because I often work with a lot of predominantly white organizations, the thing that I say to them, I don't buy into or believe in cancel culture. There are 8 billion people on this earth. That means there are 8 billion truths and 8 billion possibilities about how we might move forward. And I would like to have everybody actually working together on that, not just a handful of people. So I tell them as organizations, yeah, I think you're going to have to revisit your mission statement because, you know, that mission statement was created during Jim Crow segregation. Or, yeah, you're probably going to have to revisit your leadership model because the idea of the charismatic mega leader at the top is actually an old idea. We can come up with something else. There's things you're going to have to do. But I don't believe you have to throw out the baby in the bathwater. You just need a new bathtub. Because if you think you can do everything in the same way you've always been doing it without giving up anything, I'm here to tell you, you cannot do it. I don't even have time anymore to be nice about it. You can't. You need to let something go in order to make something else, let something else emerge so we can go somewhere differently. Ooh, Carolyn, woo! And they're with me, they're with me. So I want to come back to me. So some of you have heard that story I've told because the story I tell about where I grew up on the land and my own bias is really important for me to do it. You know, it's an invitation actually for everybody to consider where it is that they stand, and all her stories have value, right? But some things have changed in that story in the last 2 years, and in this conversation about what we can do as individuals, we can have a conversation what we can do collectively, but what can we do as individuals and how we might think of it differently? Because remember I told you I'm also angry too, right? In 2019, I had the privilege of speaking at Telluride, which is it was Mountain Film Festival, where every May they have environmental films, right? They're bringing in, and it's incredible. I don't know if you've ever been to Telluride. Aside from the fact it's beautiful, people are really rich. Oprah has a house there. Oprah was there. It was awesome, right? I was like, this is the way they all live, and I like it. Okay. That year the theme was equity, so they invited a lot of speakers like myself. Who wrote White Privilege, Robin DiAngelo. They wrote a lot of us to come speak on this big stage. There were maybe 900 people in the audience, predominantly white, predominantly well-heeled, a lot of film directors in the audience. We each had 20, 25 minutes, and man, Cheryl Strait of Wild, she introduced the panel. Then Milk, the singer, came out live, played on the piano. Yeah, it was like that. And I talked about whose story counts. So when I talked about my parents' story and named a few other black people who did amazing things out there in life. And it felt like it went really well. I want to jump ahead now to COVID in 2020. A lot of, I want to just say, predominantly white folks in different sectors in the country were rethinking the way that they do things. They really want to do something different, whether it's in publishing, media, academia. Suddenly, the doors were flying open for myself and a lot of friends of color who do this work in a lot of different capacities. And one of those was a white filmmaker who has won Emmys and Peabodys for her work. I'd actually seen some of her documentaries. I didn't realize I had. I didn't meet her in Telluride, but she had been there. And she said, would you get on a Zoom call with me? And I said, sure. And she said, so listen, HBO has commissioned me to do a documentary about trees. And I realized, in thinking about your story, that in all the people I have in here, because the way I want to talk about trees is, I'll talk about a particular kind of tree and a real person and their family associated with that tree. So I'll tell a story about the Weyerhaeuser family, for instance, because they made a lot of money off timber. She goes, but I realized I didn't have any black people up in this story. She didn't say it like that. She was just like, I realize I'm not telling a story of any African Americans. And because I like to be a jokester, I said, well, you know, if you're going to talk about trees and black people in America, you might want to talk about lynching. And I smiled when I said it. She went, you're right, but I'm not the person to do it. And I said, and you know we're not just the bad things that happen to us. And I randomly told her a story of my parents and this cherry tree that's behind them. It's a weeping cherry tree. I said my father had given that tree to my mother for their 40th wedding anniversary while they were still on the land. And that was the most romantic thing he's done before or since, but that's another story as well. And I just told her that. That's what I said. And I said, and she said, oh my God, can I tell that story of your family on the land in the cherry tree? And I said yes. I was like, oh my God, I'm really excited. The New York Botanical Gardens around the same time said, we'd love to have you come and do this residency here, and what are you working on? And I don't know why, but on Zoom I started telling the story about this cherry tree. And they were like, we're the New York Botanical Gardens. I'm like, I know. I bet you we could get access to that land. We could get a grafting of that tree. We could bring it back to the New York Botanical Gardens, and we can tell the story of your family. Right. That's what I was like. Wow. I said, this would be amazing. This would be, let's make it happen. So suddenly we have this story that's going to happen, and the filmmaker is going to bring her crew, and they're going to film it all happening, and I'm going to be on the land. And I haven't been on the land in 18 years. So this was taken on the last day my parents were there in 2003 with the cherry tree behind them. There's a conservation easement. So what that means is that nobody can just go on the land. You have to get permission from them. But now there's brand new owners on the property. There was the owner that came on who knew my parents. He sold the land to this white couple who are medical doctors. So they were two people removed. They don't know anything about any of us, right? So all these permissions have to happen. The Westchester Land Trust says, tell us where that tree is. And there it is, right next to the pink hydrangea. And I was kind of surprised they didn't know. I thought everything was protected. And I found out later, actually, everything under an easement is not protected. They are selective about what they protect, I just want to say. And they said, okay, we're going to get on the property. We just want to make sure it's there and take care of it. I sent them this picture. About 2 weeks later, this is the picture they sent back. Everything had been landscaped. Yeah. So I tell everybody in terms of my anger and sadness and disappointing, like for 3 days it was bad. When something bad happens and your stomach hurts, like my stomach literally hurt. I told the film director and she was like, oh my gosh, she was devastated. And the project was dead in the water. But there was actually a deeper thing here for me, On day 4, I called her up. I said, you know what? This is a story we have to tell because this is what always happens. It's about erasure, right? So we need to tell this story because it isn't the only one like that. And then on day 5, I was feeling a little better about myself. I said, what if we could get everybody on board to plant a new weeping cherry tree? And it took a little doing, but the Westchester Land Trust, they had a forester. They said, we'll provide the tree. The president of the Land Trust, actually, who's a woman, said, we'll do it. But still the new owners weren't responding. I told the institutions, why don't you do that? They'll listen to you more because I thought they're institutions. They weren't responding to them. I said, well, let me write them a personal letter. And in the letter, I never mentioned the word race once. I talked about my parents being black and who I was and what I was trying to do, and my parents are near the end of their lives and wanting to honor them. The woman wrote me back in 20 minutes, and she said, we'd love to honor your family. So in July of 2021, there was a group of about 10 of us filmmakers and land trust folks, and we went on the land and replanted another weeping cherry tree. It looks like I was doing all the work. I wasn't. I just got up there for a minute and did a thing with the dirt. I want to come back. I know I've been talking a lot, but I want to come back to this idea of love as though love is soft, because it isn't. Love can be bloody, it's hard, you feel loss, it costs something, you take risks every single time. And I realized that my thinking that it was soft meant that I didn't really understand what people give their lives for love all the time. So I think there's a way that it can actually be operationalized, and I mean that in the best sense in terms of how we think about it, and which is how I believe Dr. King was actually thinking about it, or I want to believe that's how he was thinking about it. I'm coming to the end. So April of last year, I was at Brown University. I was sitting in my hotel room. I was about to go and do a thing, and I was feeling depressed. And I'm not a depressed person, but I don't know. Maybe it's having these conversations. Maybe it's right now. It brings up a lot of my own stuff, right, when we think about healing and such. And I get this email from the Westchester Land Trust. And they had sent this photo because they promised that every year they would go and take a picture of the tree and let me know how it was going. You can see it there blooming, but that's not what moved me. What moved me is that the owners had taken it on themselves to plant daffodils all around the tree and in the old place where the stump was of the old tree. What they didn't know is that that's my father's favorite flower. And I know it's small, but for me it was huge because it reminded me of what's possible and what's emergent. The day that I was on there with the owner, she was so nervous. I could tell she was so nervous because she didn't know about the history of this place. The owner before them had removed all the flower beds, had cut down all the fruit trees, had removed all the gardens. She had no idea who had been there doing what before. And for me, it was just bringing her in, because the story is just not my story. It is actually all of our stories. It's not about transaction or extraction. It is about accountability. And now, actually, they feel a responsibility to it. I can let it go. I can let it go. I haven't quite yet, but I'm working on it. So the last thing that I want to say, I know I just said that, but this is really the last thing I want to say, is I want to talk about the African-American painter Robert S. Duncanson, who I didn't know, and this isn't me trying to be political, but at the inauguration of Joe Biden, I was watching it on TV, and a senator from Missouri, I'm just blanking on his name, presented a gift to Joe Biden of this painting. It's called Landscape with the Rainbow. And I looked at it when he was saying it, I was like, oh, it's another one of those bucolic environmental paintings from the 1800s. I was a little dismissive until I heard him say, painted by this African-American painter. And I know that sounds weird, but the reason it surprised me was that it's got a rainbow. So this was painted in 1859. I just want you to hold that in your mind for a second, that a black man was painting an environmental landscape. He put in a rainbow. So rainbows symbolize possibility, hopefulness, imagination. He was living during a time of slavery where his body could have been somebody else's property. Supposedly this man suffered from mental illness and had to leave the country, go over to Canada. I believe the whole country was suffering from mental illness, but that's just my opinion. That still he imagined, still he had a dream too. About 2 months ago, I got to visit his grave in Detroit. I didn't know that he was from there and was buried there, and for a long time, he had no headstone there. And a group of people got together to put a headstone for him. So the last thing that I will say, and I have to read this so I get it right, and then Carolyn will stop talking, and that I believe he was playing the long game, as I believe that Dr. King was, as I believe that Malcolm X was as well. I think a lot about the idea of a reparative gesture, and a reparative gesture for me is not about righting some wrong. It's about an intention to do better, an intention to see better. It's about your healing and mine and the earth in which we depend. It's about honoring our humanity in all of its mystery and incomprehensibility and in all of its fullness. It's about remaining curious and compassionate and empathetic and present while looking to the future. What kind of human being do you choose to be? I believe the gesture is the choice. In doing the work of social, racial, and environmental justice, we often ask ourselves, what if we get it wrong? Last year I was working with a group online. It was a staff and the boss, who was white, and a predominantly white staff. At the end of me talking about this stuff, he just blurted out so genuinely and so vulnerably, he said, "But I'm so afraid of making a mistake." And I said, "And that's because you will, but not because you're white." Because you are human, and it's what you do after you make the mistake that matters, not the mistake itself. How do you show up? How do you show up in all your vulnerability and with all your care? And I think maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who's a Black marine biologist, asks, what if we get this right? Dr. King said that in 1963 was not an end but a beginning. I believe that 2023 is not an end but a beginning. I'm still working on it concerning my feelings about Sarah the Great. But in the words of Brother West, I'm going to bring my crooked heart to bear. I want to end with these words from Malcolm X. I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I'm a human being, first and foremost, and as such, I'm for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole. I imagine Dr. King would say, amen. Thank you. Oh, they're standing. Yes. Oh. Can I stand here? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Y'all
Dr.
still love
Carolyn
me?
Finney. Thank you so much, Dr. Finney.
Yeah.
What a blessing that we've received today. Your storytelling is just so powerful amongst your brilliance. So we have a few minutes for Q&A. We have a couple of mics that are going to be available. Dr. Sherwood Smith and Sandy Bermazan will be in the aisles with the microphones, and I want to use this little moment gap to thank Sandy Bermazan from our team for the lead organizer for this event, as well as the lead organizer for our upcoming Inclusive Excellence Symposium in March, and you'll hear more about that eventually. Also want to thank Krista Walter and Masha Shaluka for all your work on behalf of the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Sarah Mell, Paul Yoon. We have a tremendous team in the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at UVM who make these opportunities happen.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we have microphones, so if anybody would like to ask Dr. Finney a question, please.
Come on, I know you got something for me. Don't be scared. Always take that first person. Just think about it. Come on. All questions are good questions. Oh, Miss Emily, I got to get over here. Yes. Ooh.
If you can hear me, I want to ask how you would answer the question you asked us, who do you stand with?
Somebody take that mic away from her. No. Okay. Thank you. Oh my God, that's a good question. She asked me, how would I answer the question, who do I stand with, if you didn't hear that. And, what I work towards, the easy thing would be I'd like to feel like I can stand with almost anyone. And what I will say, which is more pointed, is that I work to stand with people that I might not be drawn to stand next to, right? So I was in a conversation with a group of people online. So the workshop, and I was talking about, we'd all just seen that thing in the news about that in San Francisco, that unhoused woman in front of a gallery and the white man who was hosing her down. And I kind of fell into the black hole, and I was reading everything about it online, but how it's easy for me to actually stand with the unhoused woman. I find that, for me, she's a sympathetic character. I think about the housing situation. But I started reading about the man who had tried so many different things. He had asked for help for weeks and weeks in advance. This does not excuse the choice that he made, but to understand he didn't just jump from here to I'm going to get out a hose and hose her down. For me, it pointed to a city that didn't help him out, that there was no infrastructure for him either. He may have had more economic privilege than her. He may have been housed, but at the end of the day, he's still a person. I need to be able to stand with him too. Right? So for me, I'm always looking at, I always say to people, I would love to meet Christian Cooper, but you know who I really want to have a conversation with is Amy Cooper. Because I think she actually needs some people to stand with her. We made her the symbol of racism. Ain't no one person the symbol of racism, right? It is systemic, it is structural, and it doesn't mean people shouldn't be held accountable, but she lost everything. And who was there for her when she needed to figure out how to come back? Because that is what redemption is. And so I need to be able to, Sarah the Great, I need to be able to stand with her. I can stand with pretty much everybody in this room without knowing you, because you all were nice to me, so it makes it easy. But the people that aren't nice to me, most of the time, I believe, is because, like a lot of us, they're traumatized. We are all traumatized in different ways, in different times. People hurt, they're afraid, they're angry. That's not a white thing, that's not a black thing, that's a human thing. And so I'm trying to figure out, if I was asked to show up in that way, could I do it, and how would I do it? Does that mean? You call me Emily, but woo.
We can only do one. We'll have to make this the last one just due to time, unfortunately.
What?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Now?
Now.
I'll make mine fun. So your 8 years on the National Park Advisory Board,
Yeah.
outside of really all the stuff that showed up in your book, what would you really say were the meaningful things from that time? Like at kind of the advisory of a large institution trying to fix things.
Yeah. Did you all hear that? So he was asking me about my time on the National Parks Advisory Board in those 8 years. What did I feel was most meaningful about my time in terms of an organization trying to fix things? That's how I think of what I heard you say. Well, the first for me, was the learning curve. Actually, everybody on that board was way more experienced than me. When I got that job, at the time, it was my first year as a professor at UC Berkeley. This was 2008. I just finished my doctorate before that, so I'm giving up all the goods. But I was 47, and I was the youngest person on the board. And I felt good about that, but 47 at the time. And everybody there, the chair of the board was an ex-governor of Alaska, and everyone else were people who had really good experience with politics. They've been doing what they've been doing for a long time. Scientists, people who were really established. I was really intimidated. I mean, I know it doesn't seem like I can get intimidated. And I was often quiet in the beginning of the meetings because I said there's a way they do things. It was formalized. There was a table, and we each had mics with our card, and everything was taped, and there was a time of the day when the public was allowed to come in and ask questions, because the primary job, and I learned this, of the National Parks Advisory Board is actually to choose new parks and new historic sites. So there are historians who do the work all year. They gather it all in, they bring it to us, and say, so here are the sites. And during the time that I was on the board, this is when President Obama was in the White House, and so there was a very intentional push to have more diverse sites. This is where you had Stonewall and a lot of other sites, all kinds of diverse people coming to the table. So I learned about that as well. I didn't understand that was the role of the board. Also that national parks are generally nonpartisan. So even if you have the Republican Party somebody from the Republican Party is president, and you have a National Parks Advisory Board, everybody loves the parks. They tend to focus on things like infrastructure, which is important in the parks. If you have a Democratic president, like President Obama, tend to focus on more social and cultural issues. That's also important. So I learned that as well. I also learned at the very end, so I saw more parks than I'd ever seen in my life because we always had a meeting in a national park. And it was amazing for me not just to see the park, because we'd spend part of the day in a big room having these serious conversations, and we always spent half a day out in the park with staff. So you could see the people who work there and what they do. You get a sense of the land and the place. And I think national parks interpreters are some of the best storytellers that we have in this country. They are incredible. They never have any notes. I can't quite figure it out. But then they can tell you this extensive history of these places, and it really blew my mind. And the love, that people love their jobs. They just love what it is that they do. And that was so apparent to me. I was really moved by that. The last thing I want to say in answer to that question is that when the president after Obama came in, you had a new Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke, and usually what happens is a handoff, because we don't get paid for that job on the advisory board. We're citizens, they vet you and everything, but then you do this as civic duty, and I love the idea of civic duty, and I was totally down for it. And then you sit down with the new Secretary of the Interior to say, this is what we've been doing. They thank you as citizens, but also we're hoping the work carries on, because we worked with a lot of different citizens groups around the country who were continuing to do the work of bringing more science to the parks, the issue of diversity and inclusion, bringing more education to the parks, history to the parks, philanthropy. I mean, these were the things we were tasked to do, knowing we were playing a long game to do it. Zinke wouldn't meet with any of us. The chair, the ex-governor of Alaska, and his name's going to come back to me in a minute, he's somebody who had been a Navy SEAL, much like Zinke. He was a white man. He said, why don't I appeal to him with a personal letter? He wouldn't respond to him, and it was our chair who said, that's why we were all in the news, that we're quitting. Now, we'd just come to the end of our second term, so we couldn't have stayed on much longer anyway, but there was a point to be made, and we were very public about it. Because they wouldn't even sit down to hear what we, as citizens of this country, had been doing we've been doing this work, and they called us quitters in the paper. So I also learned, firsthand how, and this all the news stations were calling me, it was actually kind of overwhelming for me, because they wanted me to be argumentative about it, and I don't have a problem arguing, but what's the intention? I actually would rather have a conversation to understand why. Why can't we just sit down and have this conversation? We're just passing this on to you. Do what you will with it. But there's no need to sort of paint us all in a very particular way. And again, I'm reminded that politicians are people. They're often people with power, but they're people just the same, with a point of view and bias and needs and intentions. And they know how to use their language in a certain way. And I often think we put a lot on them to do things for us. And I don't know if that's actually a smart move. Ooh, stop talking, Carolyn. That's all I'm going to say. Stopping. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is this your phone?
Oh, yeah, I can't go anywhere without that.
Can't go without your phone.
Yeah, I'll come back for that.
So to wrap up our program today, thank you all for coming. Thank you for joining us online. You don't want to miss our last part of the program, in which Dwight Nicole will return to the stage and will lead us in Together We Can Move Mountains. Okay. All right.
Powerful.
I was crying the entire time you were talking. What a beautiful, beautiful few moments that we just all shared together. My goodness.
I have to ask you later, too. I grew up in Jersey, and what we would say botanical gardens And I hear it's Botanic Gardens. Yeah, this like an no. There's like a I can't explain it. There's like the thing like what they say like at the end of the Queen song, Freddie Mercury says, "We are the champions." Everyone else hears "of the world." So Nick and Sandy and I have been wrestling with Botanic Gardens for like
There's a whole
years.
thing about
So
it.
if you have any insight, this is an unrelated question, and I apologize. We're suffering with this one, you know.
Oh, I don't play on this. You just play on it.
Yeah,
All right.
this is Beverly Grant wrote this song, and Sandy asked if we do it. So
Together we can move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. Together we can move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. People, sometimes we despair when we think we're alone and nothing's gonna change. We might get stepped on, abused, ignored, or confused. We might suffer and told we're to blame. Oh, but together we can move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. Together we move mountains. But alone we can't move at all.
the ones who get rich, when we scrape to get by, know our unity means their defeat. So they set us against one another, sister and brother, color to color, trying to make us weak.
All together we move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. Together we can move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. From the smallest seed, a mighty tree can grow, with its roots planted firmly in the ground. Ooh, we gotta reach for the sun. Only then we'll know all the love and beauty in life can be found. Together we move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. Oh, together we can move mountains, and alone we can't move at all. One more time. Together we can move mountains. Alone we can't move at all. Oh, together we can move mountains. That alone we can't move at all. Thank you. I'm gonna go cry a little more and process, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dwight Nicole. Such a blessing. What an amazing program this year. I want to thank Event Services for the great job. Yes, they did a fantastic job. Thank you to Gene Nauheimer, our communicator, for everything involved with making this happen. Thank you all for being here. We will have a book signing for those of you who are here, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.